Sir, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And today, learning about the Business and Enterprise Systems Directorate. So we're here with Mr. Aldridge. Sir, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little background of your career and how you came to join the Air Force.
Sure, absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me. So Rich Aldridge, the PEO for Business and Enterprise Systems. Kind of Air Force family, right? Grew up an Air Force brat. My grandfather served in World War II, transitioning the Army Air Corps, and my dad spent 34 years in. So I didn't know that there was other options than joining the Air Force. So got an RTC scholarship, went to the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and spent about actually at the 11-year point, got married. My wife was active duty as well. And we said, hey, we're going to have kids. She still had an active duty service commitment. And so we said, hey, you know what, I'll join the reserves. You'll stay active duty. So kind of did that. And then at some point decided, hey, you know what, government civilian's a pretty good deal as well. It's another avenue to serve. So she got off active duty and went reserves. And so for about the last 12 years of my reserve career, I was also GS civil service. So I've done a wide range, kind of making those decisions coming in and out of active duty and civil service. I've been acquisition. I've been a log planner at a COCOM, at Transcom. Mainly engineering is my main career field. I did that for most of my career, obviously as a PEO in the program management field right now, but kind of a jack of all trades. I did space primarily as a reservist, as well as education and training here at Maxwell First Space with their university. So a pretty broad range in the career, but they say the Air Force is a great way of life, right? And it's just worked out great for our family.
Absolutely. So, sir, you lead the Business and Enterprise Systems Directorate at Gunter. Could you just tell us a little bit about the team? How many people do you have? What's your mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think we're always kind of the shadow PEO. Most people don't know we exist, right? Because it doesn't deliver things people can touch and see. So the bulk of what we do is our slogan is we run the systems that run the Air Force, moving money, manpower, and materiel. So while most maybe don't know we exist, I guarantee you every day we impact them in some form or fashion. So if you're a civilian, the government benefits retirement system that you go in and do whether it's your healthcare adjustments or how much is getting taken out for your TSP, we run that application for the entire federal government, not just the Air Force. So 3.3 million federal civilian employees use GVRS, and then we manage that down at our HR SPO at Randolph. If you're in the military side, it's everything from MilPDS, which does the manpower side, the HR side, to the Air Force Fitness Management System. So we do the things that kind of run the business of the organization, right? The Air Force. So it's financial accounting, it's HR, it's logistics, it's IG, it's the acquisition systems even. So for our AFMC folks, most of those, I'll say PM tools, whether that's PMRT or CCAR, some of those things, we manage that for the Air Force. So that's the bulk of what we do. We do that in 3 locations. There's about 1,300 folks, and that's all airmen of all flavors, right? So military, both enlisted and officer, that's civilians, and then that's support contractors. About 1,300 down here at Gunner Annex in Montgomery. We've got about 925 up there at Wright Pat, and then we've got about 350 that do the HR systems down there at Randolph, sitting with AFPC and AETC supporting them. And then there's a little slice of my portfolio that does enterprise services. So we manage things like AFWay, which is the Air Force's e-commerce portal where you can order laptops, desktops, printers from. We do AFWay. And then we also do the NetSense suite of contracts. So that's about 6 IDIQs where people can buy IT hardware, IT software, and IT services, not just in the Air Force, but anybody in DoD can order off of any of those IDIQs. So that's the gist of what we do.
Mm-hmm. So is your business primarily software or hardware?
It is. There's obviously some hardware components. So for those applications that are not running on, say, a cloud or a formal data center somewhere, they're still on a base or something. We do have to do some hardware stuff with servers, but for the most part, we are predominantly, I'll say, software and services. Again, 90% of what we do is software, and then 10% is those services I talked about, offering the contract IDIQs and those things. But yes, predominantly software.
Okay.
And so not any kind of software, right? Business software. So we don't do any software that runs on aircraft or any of those kinds of things. Intel systems, cyber operations. We're just strictly business software.
Okay. All right. We've heard a lot about Bespin. of recent is in software factories kind of in general. If you could give us some background, where did those, what are they, where did they start, and what's their focus there?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'll start, I guess, at the broader, just software factories in general. So obviously, we had a service acquisition executive, Dr. Roper, that was very savvy on software, very much wanted to change the Air Force culture and how we deliver software. And so wanting to do it in a more innovative, modern way, right? Agile DevSecOps, continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD pipelines. And so I'll say the genesis was, Kessel Run when AOC 10.2 was failing. Taking it out of the hands of a large contractor and bringing it more into the government in that more innovative way. And so Kessel Run was kind of the first branded, Air Force software factory. And again, the intent of those is for organizations to have I'll say an innovation engine, right? A team that's doing this in a modern way, and then kind of informing the rest of that portfolio. So that's what Kessel Run's doing for PEO Digital. So oddly enough, that's been for me. So 30 years ago, this organization, when it fell under Air Force Comm Command, had a large component of 3,000 coders called the Air Force Software Factory. I mean, that was the name of the organization, which when the Gulf War kicked off, the Air Force said, hey, we need those people flying and maintaining jets because we're at war. And so that Air Force Software Factory kind of got disbanded, and we started hiring contractors to do software development. But they left about 40 coders down here at Gunner Annex for those customers that could not pay a contractor to do their software. So I had about 40 coders remaining. Unfortunately, what we did with those poor young airmen is we put them like one or twosies out in these program offices. And so you've got these poor airmen that learn modern software languages at Keesler, and then we bring them into this organization, say, hey, that's great, but we're going to have you do COBOL that was written 40 years ago, right? So these poor airmen were just having to learn a very old software language. They were by themselves, and it was just a real struggle. And our DOX report showed that our airmen were pretty miserable. And frankly, in some ways, we weren't using them to do software coding. We were using them to run test checklists and be a database administrator, or worse yet, looking over the shoulder of a contractor doing the work, which that's just a miserable state of being. And so as Kessel Run was kind of getting more mature and software factories were coming back, in fashion, we kind of used BES product innovation, which is what Bespin stands for, as how do we take all those airmen and build a team to where they're not alone, they can collaborate, they can share their knowledge, we can get some tools, common tools, the agile tools that now everyone's using, and let's centralize all those folks into one place to gain that, both efficiency and gain knowledge sharing. So you don't have poor airmen going it alone and they've got a team of other folks. So we pulled in program managers and financial managers and contracting officers and, engineers, cybersecurity. So we kind of pulled those people that can think outside the box, pulled them into what we call Bespin. And now that's our innovation engine. So we're still kind of doing things the way we were, right? Where it's a team of government folks leading contractors doing the work with a small team of Air Force coders doing mobile applications. And then we kind of rotate people through Bespin, and then they learn they learn the processes, they learn the tools, and then they bring an innovative culture back to their legacy program offices. So I'm using Bespin as kind of my innovation engine. And then one other note is, a few years ago, Dr. Roper said every time he goes somewhere, people are hot in demand for this, right? Why can't I do my work on this? And really the heart of the problem is none of my customers wanted to be the first one to bring me a mobile application requirement. Because as you can imagine, there needs to be like an Air Force app store. There needs to be Air Force tools to build, mobile applications. And frankly, there needs to be a place to host all that, right? To actually host the software and then host the. So if you're the first customer that comes, you're getting a $15 million bill for a $200,000 mobile app, right? Because you got to pay for all the infrastructure behind this. And no one wanted to be the first. And so part of what Bespin is let's think outside the box, like a true startup running out of a garage. And what's the best way to get that started? So we've leveraged a lot of small business innovation research dollars, right? So I chip in 100,000, I get $1 million back. So right, it's a great business model. So for the last 3 years, we've greatly leveraged SBIR funds to kind of stand up Bespin and stand up a mobile application ecosystem. And we've got about a dozen mobile applications out there that we're now doing for a variety of customers. And it's centrally funded right now But now that, we're moving out of innovation and we can't really use SBIR dollars anymore, now we're having to figure out, okay, how do we as an Air Force now fund this every year? And then when customers have a mobile app requirement, they're just bringing the $300,000-$400,000 to develop the mobile app. They don't have to pay for the big, I'll say, factory as a part of that. So that's where we're kind of now transitioning out of the garage and into a more stable, functioning factory of mobile apps.
That's excellent. I mean, because using things on devices, that's the technology of the day, really.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
So, sir, a lot of systems over the years were developed kind of like individually, and so you end up with these things called stovepipes that we talk about all the time. So I would imagine a big challenge for your team is trying to integrate those things across the range. So how do you get after that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So this is a really complex portfolio. So an interesting data point is, out of all those systems that help someone do their job, whether it's at a squadron level, MAGCOM level, right? There's lots of tools everywhere. I only manage 22% of those. So there's 78% of those business tools that are being used across the Air Force at all levels that are not under, I'll say, governed space, right? And so when we either pick up something new, inherit something legacy, or just managing what we already have, when we're making changes or we modernize something, like you said, all those systems talk, right? And so the old way of doing things was point-to-point interfaces, right? So this system needs to talk to this system. I need to build a link between the two. So you can imagine, if I don't own 78% of the systems that need to link to, so I can do something on my end that breaks the other end, right? If they don't have the ability, the funding, the people to make the change on their end, then that handshake is going to get broken. And so you can imagine, when my customer is driving me to make changes, and I need to now turn around to, say, 50 or 100 data exchange partners for that one application, say, hey, sorry, my customer is driving me to make this change. You 75 now need to make the changes on your systems. They don't all necessarily say, absolutely, we'll do that on the timeline you need, right? So you're right, it's extremely complex, it's hard to manage. So that's really where the bulk of where my time and most of my leadership's time is, working those gaps and seams between the handshakes of all those systems. So that really is a significant challenge. And what's even more interesting from my perspective, just putting an Air Force hat on, not a PEO hat, is oftentimes we're being asked that Sergeant Snuffy at Base X developed this great, name it, right, wing scheduling tool, OPR tracking tool, something that's great, that's helped their unit automate something, right? But now Airman, Sergeant Snuffy's gone, and unfortunately his or her replacement just no longer knows what to do with this, and right, they want to hand it somewhere, and I get that, and that makes sense, and it's smart. But it's IT isn't free. I don't care where it is. IT isn't free, and so invariably it doesn't come with any additional people or money to do that. And so if we try to take that one tool being used at Base X and recognize, hey, this could be used for every base in the Air Force, right? This can be an enterprise tool. It's usually hard to find a customer somewhere in the Pentagon that will own it and say, okay, we will be kind of the requirement manager and the funding sponsor, and we will be the central point for you now to go do this for the whole enterprise, i.e. every base, right? So most of my customers are not MAGCOMs. It's 99% an air staff functional, be that A1, A4, AQ, AA, IG, OSI. And I have 17 major functional customers with about 85 GOSCS direct peers that all think that every day I wake up and I'm like, I'm here to serve them, right? So lots of demand. They all think that they're 30 systems. Every single one of those is a number one priority to me, right? Every day. This is all about relationship management and then working those seams and gaps, like you said. It's pretty complex, but it does get you up in the morning. I'll say that. Every day is exciting because you never know what you're going to get.
And I would imagine too, as AFMC continues along this digital campaign that they've got right now, that just increases the complexity and increases the demand on your.
You're right. It sure does. I mean, obviously these systems, be them, logistics or program management, like you said, digital campaign, is, how we as an Air Force run our business in a better, more efficient way. And yeah, my systems are front and center in that conversation. You're right. So, yet another duty. It's all good.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about COVID. When we've all first went into mass telework, it put a significant strain on a lot of the IT systems that we kind of quickly bounced back from. But so if you could tell us some of the immediate challenges that you faced and how you guys overcame them.
Sure. Yeah. So there's I guess a two-part answer to that. The first one being, we're like everybody else, right? So we went full 100% telework almost immediately. So, whether it's just by, sheer dumb luck, we had patient zero for the state of Alabama. So the very first patient in the state was one of our employees. So we had to adjust before we had a lot of good guidance locally, right? We had to be at the forefront of, gosh, what do we do now? And so we went pretty quickly to 100% telework, probably before most any other AFMC organization. And the nature of what we do, to be honest, lends itself to telework, right? We're managing software developers that work all over the country. So it's not that you have to be in the office. And a lot of what we do is collaboration through whether it's email, phone calls, telecons, and now obviously things like this, Zoom. It's gotten much better. So we are a demanding customer like anyone else. We weren't necessarily more pressured from our customers that, IT obviously is becoming, even a greater need with COVID. Unfortunately for my PEO partner up at Hanscom, Major General Schmidt, who's PEO C3INN, he had the intense pressure, right? Because he owns the pipes. So the end part of C3INN is networks, right? So he had tremendous pressure early because our VPNs were only built for about 10 or 12,000 people being TDY, right, across the Air Force. They were not built for every person in the Air Force to be working from home. So his team just did phenomenal yeoman's work to get our pipes squared away, VPN connections. So they had the heavy lift. So from a mission perspective, it didn't really add a lot of pressure, or there wasn't a lot of demand to do things differently than we were already doing. Now, as an organization internal to BES, like I said, we pretty much went 100% telework. We're darn near there. We do have some pockets of classified work. We do have pockets where people have to put a finger on a keyboard to manage a server or do something on a server. Again, I don't have a very big hardware need. And then we've got some folks that frankly are going crazy at home, whether it's spouse, kids, name it, that want to go in. So we're pretty close to 100% telework. And to be honest, I think we're far more productive. Like many organizations are finding, right? They're far more productive. I think in some ways we're losing the team dynamic, like others are recognizing. Hey, it was great to do, Zoom happy hours on Fridays. It's kind of cool and neat. But frankly, now it's just yet another Zoom call. So it doesn't have the great team building flavor that they used to have. And so, especially with the new folks, whether they're, civilians that have come in, interns, the military that have PCS'd in, they've only met people through a Zoom screen. Right. And we're losing that team dynamic and building trust-based relationships that are critical to, you have the staff meeting in the morning and then afterwards you see clusters of people talking in the hallway. I think those are critical relationship building moments for an organization, or frankly, even, hey, let me just walk down the hall and pop in their office and have the face-to-face conversation instead of sending an email. And now, the written word isn't sometimes as clear or as good as the spoken word. You don't get the facial expressions. Things get taken out of context. So I think when the emergency order kind of eases, there'll probably be some period of time where we'll come back in to reconnect, let the new people do the face-to-face connections. My approach is I'm going to foster telework to the maximum, extent possible, both military, civilian side, and we'll see what the policies that roll out, because we are extremely productive, but I don't want to lose the human element as well.
Yeah. So looking at some of the secondary order of effects that occurred, I know speaking with some people in the PK career, they talked about a system they use, Conright. And initially, it wasn't super easy to access that remotely, although they overcame that pretty quickly, and now it's functioning really well. So, which is really kind of an enhancement now to that capability. I mean, it made the system better by necessity. Have you seen any similar kinds of examples in other systems that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Conright's a great example of how COVID threw a wrench in decisions that were made in the past, right? So specifically to that, Con IT is our modernized contract management system, right? That we started about 4 years ago and is going absolutely fantastic. So it's a partnership we have with the USDA. They're our developer. We host in their data center in Kansas City, and Con IT is fantastic. Now, Conright does more of the FMS and acquisition contracting, I'll call it. And it's a legacy system, right? It's been around for decades. We host it there on servers sitting there on WritePat itself. So they're kind of base hosted. That was a decision made years ago when every base was doing contract writing on their own way. And we said, let's pick one tool, an enterprise tool. And so the decision was made when we went to one, we would host it there at WritePat on the servers and the comms bar. It's a fine decision. But as I'm sure everybody at WritePat knows, WritePat-based connectivity is a challenge. Just with more and more IT stuff coming in, those pipes were just struggling, and just the various settings, right? We do these IT things in stovepipes. So like I said before, sometimes those handshakes don't always happen. And so people doing the network side, there were some struggles on getting WritePat good comm. So now imagine COVID hits, and instead of people being on the base trying to access the Conright servers on the base, which was already a challenge, now we all have them off base from home. And that connectivity was never, I'll say, allowed, because of contracting stuff is sensitive. And so the functional leaders at the time said, I don't want people to be able to do things from home, because we don't know if their spouse is working for a company on a contract they're now working on, right? So there was you can only do this on base approach, which was great. That made sense from a mission purpose. But now that we're COVID, everyone working from home, we did have to now give people access off base, and not just give people access, but now you have everyone working off base trying to get through the WritePat bandwidth. And so yeah, to your point, when COVID hit and we were now trying to do contract writing from off base, it just really presented a lot of challenges that we had to work through. And now multiply that times whether it's a financial system, any of the other systems that we do that are not in a cloud, that we're now having to get through to a base or somewhere where it's local. Those were all challenges that we had to work through, because who would have ever anticipated that when decisions were made 30 years ago, 3 years ago, right? No one anticipated something like this, where literally overnight the whole workforce would be working in disconnected fashion.
So, sir, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log. We really appreciate your time.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me.